welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am joined by someone who is now officially a friend of the show. Once you have been here twice, you are a friend. So welcome, friend. Could you please introduce yourself and the books that you are here to discuss today?
Oh, thank you. It's great. It's great to be a friend of the show. Thank you so much. I'm Daniel Braum. I'm an author of short stories, which are mostly categorized in the horror genre umbrella. I call my work strange tales because they're the kind of stuff that you might think of when you're watching like the old Twilight Zone or the old Outer Limits, because they deal with, there's sort of like a Rorschach. There's a lot of intentional ambiguity, like, is this psychological? Is this supernatural?
I love that description, and I really am very interested in sort of the genre boundaries or the genre overlaps between horror and strange tales and weird fiction. But before we get to that, um, last time you were here to discuss Night Marchers. What have you been up to since then?
Yeah. It's great. It's great to be back. It was great to talk about the book, the Night Marchers from Cemetery Dance, and I've been busy. Been reading a lot of great stuff, but also I have two books on the horizon at the time of this recording. We have one called Creatures of Liminal Space, which is an illustrated edition of Strange Tales, and coming out in the fall, a little closer to the air date, is another one from Cemetery Dance called Phantom Constellations, and they're both books of short stories.
I really enjoyed reading both of them. They're such interesting collections in and of themselves, and I really enjoyed the way that the stories speak to each other. So let's talk a little bit about Creatures of Liminal Space first. That was the first I read, and that is the first coming out, right? Did
Yeah, that's the one.
It has three short stories and 12 pieces of flash fiction. Before we get to the short stories, I'm really curious about what drew you to flash fiction and if they were written in response to prompts or if they just sort of, ex nihilo, came out of your mind spontaneously.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Well, the way that it came to be part of the project was originally Creatures of Liminal Space was going to just be the three short story illustrated chapbook from Jack and Apes Press. I just want to mention Dan Sauer. Dan is the illustrator and publisher of Jack and Apes Press, and we were having such a great time collaborating on the project. And he realized that he had page space. He was like, "Well, let's expand this book. What do you have?" And I thought about it, and during the pandemic, I had recovered 48 or so pieces of flash fiction. This was stuff I had written a decade and a half, maybe even 2 decades ago for a project called The Daily Cabal. It was a web series that I don't think is up anymore, but it ran. It was founded by my friend author Rudy Dorneman and others, and I think the idea was every day a little cabal, a little team of authors would just post a flash fiction. You had like 500 or 1,000 words, and you had to meet your deadline. So for mine, they weren't written to prompts, although some for the website were. And so for the project for Creatures, I took the task of whittling these recently found treasures of mine, some treasures, some not so treasured, down to what would be the best ones that would fit into the Creatures project. And I gave myself does it have a creature in it? Does it have a liminal space in it? Not to be too on the nose, but that was the what made my top 12 right there.
Nice. That's a really interesting story. What was it like? I'm sure that writers go back to their old writing all the time, but finding something from so long ago, did you notice difference in your style or how you've developed as a writer since then?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, I find flash fiction to be very challenging because I tend to like to I think my natural paces or my natural structures are to go long. And I remember at the time when I was asked to join the Flash Fiction Project, I did find it really challenging and a lot more of an intellectual exercise. But I found it really, I know it's probably cliche and on the nose to say it, but I found it really improved myself as a writer. Like really being conscious of I only have a certain amount of space. It really made me think about all the elements I knew. It made me think about all the skills, the non-intuitive part of my writing. And I felt like, wow, if I'm going to pull off these ideas in a flash fiction structure, I'm going to really have to be more focused. And in turn, I feel like that made me become more aware of how different ideas would be more fitting or more optimal for other story types. Like, is this a novel-sized idea? Is this a short story-sized idea? And yeah, it was really interesting. And then, of course, you read something like, oh, I remember that. That was a stinker. That didn't really work so well. And then you read some of them, you're like, wow, like I didn't remember that. Like both in terms of like, wow, I felt like it was successful in that it works and it still communicates. And sometimes like I just didn't even remember the creative idea. I didn't remember the supernatural thing. And some of the stuff in there, I didn't even remember having the bravery to even write about some of the things there. So it was a really rewarding experience, especially thinking that they had been long gone and I had not saved them.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's fascinating. So a lot of the stories in this volume and the other one that we're going to discuss share themes and ideas from your previous work that I've read. There's lots of stories of people traveling, lots of mythology and sort of ancient history, and lots of feeling like you are sort of dwelling on the outskirts of a large mystery. I'm really curious about when you approach a story, what comes first for you? Is it the setting? Is it the mood you want to explore? Is it a character? Or does it change from story to story?
I'd love to say that it changes from story to story, but I think you hit it on the head with the first one. I think most of the time its setting is the part that really sparks that part that can't be taught, that sparks the inspiration for me. Um, I think all those things do come after and do come closely for it, but the thing that inspires me is setting. After that, I do think about character and conflict, which I think forms literary structure and dynamic structure. But I try to then, that's when the intellectual part kicks in, and I try to think, okay, what is the best way to tell a story that could only be told in this setting, or what conflicts arise from this setting, and what would be the best characters to explore them, or what characters would be found in the setting, and what would those innate conflicts be?
Hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think that it's, travel in general and being in places away from home is in and of itself like a liminal space, right? Like you're existing outside of your regular everyday. And so it already puts you in this alternative sort of mode in a lot of ways. And it lets you explore the boundaries between like what you know and what you don't know, what you know about yourself and what you don't know about yourself, all that. Yeah. So I'm really curious also about the aspect of sort of lots of like, the new world brushing up against like an old kind of lost world, and you play into like a lot of mythology too. Yeah, could you talk about sort of how you craft your mysteries? Because your stories are very much about just as much about what you don't say as what you do.
Yeah, a lot of times those mysteries or that folklore or lore is is that thing that is inspiring to me. It is the part where it's the natural curiosity comes in. And I find that my one of my modes, or I think about crafting a mystery or crafting, a story about the supernatural, is to have it be a catalyst for the human story. So in many ways, the stories in this book, although it's full of ghosts and supernatural and the unexplained, it's not necessarily stories about that stuff. And what I mean by that, it's not necessarily like, yeah, it's the vampire and the story is about finding out how to kill it and slaying it. Often I'm much more interested in, and my process tends to lend itself organically to being like, how are these situations, these supernatural or psychological oddities, catalysts for the conflicts in these conflicted characters, and how do they change or how do they rise or fall to it? And I think that's just my theory on what makes good fiction from my point of view. Um, Stories about conflicted characters, and I'm just so interested in the supernatural. I wouldn't really want to write stories without them in it, even though I kind of do come close to having some of them be really, really subtle supernatural in here. But yeah, that's I think if I had to say how do I craft, that would be my line on it.
Nice. When you were organizing the short stories around the flash fiction, how much you wouldn't call it drafting, but how much moving pieces around was there? Like, were you going for a sort of particular rhythm or uh rise and fall in the order of the pieces? What was your thinking on that?
Yeah, thanks for and when we started this, you mentioned that the stories did inform each other, and I appreciate that. There was a lot of juggling around. I'm not sure what I was going for. I think that was just sort of like that. Yeah, I wanted it to feel right, so I wasn't. I At some point I landed on just like almost like a sort of a symmetrical thing. I think it's 3-1-3-1. Yeah, it's the three flashes and then a long piece, three flashes and then a long piece and so on. And I just wanted it to like have that sort of balance on it on the page because it's an illustrated book. And I was really much more aware of and able to work on how the book as a physical object. So there was that going on was that what gave the initial structure. And then when choosing what stories and what content, I did do a lot of juggling. I'm not really remembering like what but there was a certain I don't remember what the logic or what if it all was, but I did want them to feel right together that way. And yeah, I think that's a great thing if a reader can pick up on a certain cadence or a certain rhythm or see certain resonance. I think that's great, and it also doesn't even matter if that's something that the it's even maybe it's even more wonderful when it's something that the author and publisher didn't intend, but that the stories work together. That yeah, the reader sees something in it.
Absolutely. It's akin almost to like a good playlist, right? Like you don't always know
Yeah,
what is informing why you put songs in a particular order, but like it's just you hit the right vibe, and you know it's right.
yeah, well said. Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's exactly it. Like a word playlist, so to speak.
So, I would love to, before we move on, talk a little bit more about the illustrations because they are stunning, like absolutely beautiful works of art. So, what was that process like working with Dan?
Oh, thanks so much for asking that. Yeah, Dan, I just want to say his name again. It's Dan Sauer, and he runs Jack and Napes Press, and he is a an artist, an illustrator, and a designer. He did the cover for the Night Marchers and Other Strange Tales, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to work together. It was a great collaboration in that um, I just he picked the illustrations, I picked the stories, and it was just great to see the resonances there. Like when he before he had even read all the things, he was like, "Yeah, just give me a keyword or two, or just give me an image or two." Like a real, he went like real basic on that. And then as he started creating them and reading the pieces, these images came to life. So yeah, it was really wonderful to just see. It's not something I get to do a lot, so it's just wonderful to see illustrations bring the work alive. And it was wonderful to see Dan's process of what he saw at what he saw in the stories, and then also what he saw in the stories as a set. Because what's wonderful about these illustrations is it's I guess it's a 15 black and white illustrations. I guess we're an audio podcast, but Dan style is photo realistic. It's actually photographic montages. Dan is inspired very much by the author, the illustrator that comes to mind is J.K. Potter, who did a lot of work for the old Arkham House. He worked for some short story collections by Lucia Shepard, who's a favorite of mine. So it was a really rewarding experience. It was great collaborating with Dan. Dan is a fantastic artist. So it was really different and really a pleasure to put the book together. And then it's not always the case. It's always hard work, and sometimes it's just hard work. But it's so wonderful when it can be just like an extra good time.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's great. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the other book that you have coming out, Phantom Constellations. Could you tell us about that one?
Yeah, that's coming out in the fall from Cemetery Dance, and yeah, it's believe it or not, it's going to be my fifth full short story uh, collection, and I wanted to I wanted to have a book of stories that really um, captured what we were talking about earlier in the podcast, captured that Twilight Zone kind of feeling, captured that those ambiguities, those intentional mysteries, and a lot. As I was trying to come up with that, the title story in the book, Phantom Constellations, is perhaps one of the most subtle strange tales that I've written. In that the supernatural is maybe it even just turns on a line, but it's also a story of very human conflicts and very human relationships, and it raised the thought to me of like, yeah, are we ever communicating? Are we seeing? Am I seeing what you're seeing? And is he or she seeing what I'm seeing? So it raised the fact that a constellation in the sky is like, wow, we see Taurus or we see Orion's belt, but these are celestial objects millions and millions of miles away from each other. They're all tricks of our eye, or they are all inventions of our eye. And that metaphor just it really resonated to me in what I like about certain kinds of fiction and what I wanted to achieve in my kind of fiction. So Phantom Constellations became the title story for the collection, and hopefully all the stories in the book have some sort of resonance with that notion.
Hmm. That leads very nicely into a question I had sort of about like the tone or mood that you're going for in these pieces. Because a lot of them feel very like they're really beautiful with this sort of like melancholic or
Yeah.
elegiac type feel to them. And that pairs so well with like the weird or the strange. Why do you think that is? Because I see that operating in some of these stories.
Wow, I wish I had an answer for that, except I'll say guilty as charged. I wish it's one of those things where you put it together and you're like, yep, that's there. Yeah, that tone. Yeah, there's like, a nostalgic, a wistfulness, a melancholy um, to it. And yeah, I'm not sure why it is. I know that there's some. Um, it lends itself so well atmospherically to strange tales. It lends itself so well. Other authors have, such as Robert Aikman, have that sort of nostalgia and wistfulness, and it works. It works. I don't have a great answer to it, but it just reminds me something about another music reference. Regina Spektor is a musician who I really like a lot, and I think she was asked a question about it on an interview I heard, and she said, "Yeah, I guess she said something a lot more eloquently than I just said." She's like, "Yeah, I don't necessarily need to know, the how or why my inspiration works on certain things. I just do it." And that was a pretty, she's got for a real, she's got a lot of wisdom in her for her sometimes jolly songs going on there.
Yeah, I love her. And that is
Yeah, she's great.
there is something that's very ineffable about trying to talk about process. Like you're never going to fully have access to your own your own process, it feels like sometimes. That's so interesting. And I think a lot of it works because like what you were saying about the Phantom Constellations and what comes across in that story about like how you never really know if you are perceiving the same things that others are perceiving. There's something a little like a teensy bit existentialist about that and a little isolating to think that like you are in your own subjectivity. I just think it pairs beautifully with a lot of the story sort of being about like complicated and unfulfilled relationships and stuff like that. My favorite is the Loch Ness Monster story. It is
Oh, thank you.
so beautiful. I'd love to talk about that one if we could, because the the human relationships are, as you were saying for some of your other stories, absolutely front and center in that.
Yeah. Um, and yeah, I'm kind of combining what that the answers more coming to me about inspiration for those moods. I feel like why it might lend itself so well is that when and I think it is more than a bit existential. There's a lot of looking at things or trying to look at things that way, maybe in an unromanticized way. Like, yeah, it's so romantic to look at the constellation and be like, oh, it's just this meaning there, and it's perhaps unnostalgic or unromantic to be like, oh, yeah, we're all on this rock hurtling through space. We're all eventually going to die like the universe. That is scary and cold and depressing. But I think it highlights that one of the things about the human condition and humanity is choice. And a lot of these, even though there's a lot of dark stories and there's a lot of loss and perhaps a lot of death and even a lot of scary things that happen in the stories, they're ultimately about people who are struggling, and even if they don't make it, that they're still fighting, they're still struggling, and they're making choices to move on or move into the light. And that's definitely I think you hit on that in the Loch Ness Monster story for sure. Is about two people kind of in that place, and it might illustrate the tone the best of, yeah, like two people who are just kind of in this maybe living afterlife. They everything they thought they had in their life and the people they loved. One of the main characters has lost her brother, and she's lost her father, and yeah, she meets an old friend and after decades just by chance, and they kind of go on this um, weird adventure to just kind of find and solve the mystery of what happened to her lost father. And yeah, like there's a lot of that's a really human story there, even if you're taking the supernatural off the table. I mean, that's something I can relate to, and hopefully that's something that people can relate to.
Absolutely. Yeah, stories like that one really feel, they're obviously they are stories in and of themselves, but they also feel like they are like the aftermath of other stories that you haven't seen sometimes. Like people dealing with bringing their own stories into these situations and being informed by them. And gosh, like they're just both really two lovely collections of fiction. And I'm so glad that you came to share them with us. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. It was great talking with you about them. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. What is next for you? Are you writing now?
Yeah, I'm writing. I'm always writing short stories, and I've been long working on revisions for my next novel, which I think it's due out in 2026 from Lev Press. So always writing, always trying to stay inspired.
Nice. All right. Well, Godspeed. And hopefully, maybe we can have a chat in 2026 about your novel.
That would be fantastic. Thank you so much for asking.
All right, listeners, it's on you now. By the time that you hear this, Creatures of Liminal Space will be available and Phantom Constellations will be available shortly. So please check them both out in their time and in your time. You can head to your favorite website, bookstore, library, perhaps. Do you have any places that you'd like to send people for access to your books?
Absolutely. Going to the publishers, Cemetery Dance, cemeterydance.com, and also Jackanapes Press, jackanapespress.com is great. My favorite indie bookstore is called The Green Hand Bookstore, and that's in Portland, Maine.
Thank you. All right, listeners, you have your mission. This has been absolutely lovely. Thank you again for your time. And it is now time to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.